They touch me, it's consequences that come with that.
I call you next. Hey, Leak, they trying to steal our shit.
I feel like a lot of people took away the negative from that.
That shit out here lying is trademark, and I own the trademarks, and it's public record.
Like, ain't nobody gotta lie about, bro.
Pull up with 20 niggas with ski masks.
Like super hating, like
Ain't nobody trying to hear you, not no street nigga.
But she ain't never paid for not one of my
I'm finna die for this shit.
trying to get out.
They died of first thing
For this shit.
Man, he had potential
I
to
ain't never
grow up.
touched none of y'all. I ain't never did. I don't owe y'all niggas shit. I don't owe y'all niggas shit.
She said, I killed a boy, I'm going to prison.
You can out-internet me, but you can't out-business me and out-grind me.
We are here on another episode of Address It. Today, I got a legend, pretty much a myth to me until today. You know, this is a guy, you know, me and my dad, we argue back and forth, you know, old school, new school, who's better. He always tries to humble me and let me know that my guy that I think started it didn't start it, you know. So you're a guy I heard about, you know, like I said, heard about before I knew. And man, I'm just glad to have you here today, man. How are you?
I won't complain. Thank you for having me. Man.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Yeah. Like I said though, you are a legend in your own right. Third pick of the draft?
Yes.
Third pick? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me a little bit about, for the people that don't know who you are, just explain yourself the best way you can.
Oh my, that's I don't know where to begin. I mean, I'm from Mississippi, Gulfport, Mississippi. I was fortunate to go to LSU. At LSU, my first year, I averaged 30.2 points a game. I think I still hold the all-time freshman NCAA scoring record. The second year, I played, Shaq and I were teammates, along with Stanley Roberts. That year, I averaged 28. During that year, Dale Brown gave me the autobiography of Malcolm, which changed my life. Went to the NBA, the third pick, first round. And during that summer of that first year, after my first year in the NBA, I embraced Islam. And I had a 9-year career in the NBA, decent career. And so here I am with you.
If I forgot to mention it, this is brother Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf,
Yes.
formerly known as Chris Jackson.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we know you had the transition into Islam. Everybody doesn't change their name, you know. Why was it important for you to change your name?
You know, I read a verse in the Quran where Allah says, when you enter Islam, enter wholeheartedly. And so for me, I wanted to just drop everything and start anew, because they say when you become a Muslim, it's like you're a newborn baby. You know, everything is forgiven. And then also the history of slavery, you know, where our names came from. And this is the reason I changed it. And I wanted to choose a name for myself, because all the names are beautiful names, or have a name that had significant meaning to it, something to strive for. And Mahmoud, elegant and praiseworthy. Abdul-Rauf, the servant of the Most Kind. So these are things that I'm constantly trying to evolve to.
What would you say led you to Islam, though? Because I know you had a Christian upbringing.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was the transition to Islam?
Ooh, that's a long story, but I'm going to try to minimize it for you. I mean, life experiences, the things you see, the things you don't see in relation to, I mean, your environment has a way of molding and shaping you. And so growing up, I just had a lot of questions. And oftentimes when I would ask questions, I would get two of the same responses. That you just have to believe and you can't question God. And to me, that was unsatisfactory. So all of these, just needing those answers to those questions and they never being satisfied. Once I got the autobiography, it piqued my interest even more, and just how Malcolm himself, how he thought, how he articulated issues, and that was something that I wanted. And so once I picked up the Quran, I remember reading 2-3 pages. And I can't remember the exact pages that I read, but I can remember how it made me feel to this day. And once I read them, I was 100% certain. The brother across the table from me, I said to him, I said, listen, my search is over. And it's like everything that I had thought about, the questions that I wanted answered, was answered in those 3 pages.
Mm.
And so that's what did it for me, and I never looked back.
You talk about the search. You know, you're a lottery pick. You are high status guy. What kept your search for God? Like, sometimes a lot of people may lose their
Great question.
search if they feel they got it all, worldly things.
Great question. I grew up in a Christian background. I grew up with, in particular, my grandmother, my aunt, and my uncle. They were the biggest influence for me religiously. And so just growing up in that environment, always with the concept that there's a higher power, always instilling in me to pray for others more than you pray for yourself, and just be mindful of that. I was that little boy that I would turn my music off when I passed the church. You know, I would walk. Even though I may not have my hands up in the air, I'm constantly thinking about my relationship with God. And so that was something that was just instilled in me, and it just never left. And that's where the search came from. And it's just carried over now that I'm a Muslim. And I'm just, it's hyper now. It's even more.
So you were in the NBA before you took your shahada?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just give me a little background on that. Like, who was the most influential, you know, where did you take your shahada? Who was with you? How did that go?
Yeah, at the time, I really didn't, but when I took my shahada, the biggest influences with me was the autobiography of Malcolm.
Okay.
And I ended up, because I was still searching in the NBA, man. I didn't tell anybody at the time, but I was putting crosses in my shoes. In my shorts. I would have a cross sometimes on my shoes. Because when you grow up with something for so long, right, even though you're looking into other things, it's still there's this sort of fear. But the autobiography is the thing that encouraged me. Once I met this young brother from New York named Mark James, and Islam came up in conversation. He said he met this Muslim. We can go to the masjid and pick up the Quran. I said, well, let's go. And when we came back, that's the moment I picked up the Quran and I read those 3 pages. And I'm like, hey, man, this is all my answers. Look, this is it for me. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so that's what kept that search alive, even when I was in the NBA, because I always understood that the value of there's a higher being that controls everything, and that we're going to have to answer to that higher being, irrespective of the fame, irrespective of the money. I never allowed that to sidetrack my search.
Yeah.
And that's why, for me, people would say, hey, man, if you're trying to come into this Islam, your endorsements, I said, look, man, I can care less about that. Because when it's all said and done, man, this life is temporary anyway.
Yeah.
And we have to answer. So I always grew up with that mindset, which made it easier for me to make a lot of the decisions that I made.
I see you mentioned a couple of times that you felt like you were molded for Islam, and you referenced getting up, 5 a.m. in the morning for working out. You know, what age were you in this? Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was 9, 10 years old when I decided that I wanted to be the best basketball player in the world.
Yeah.
And I knew it was only by the grace and mercy of God, because even to this day, I don't know a lot of people that was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning at my age doing those things. And I'm talking about freezing weather. I'm talking about thunder and lightning. And I'm not exaggerating. And so, ask me that question again.
Just telling me about, you were already molded. You felt like the way you were living kind of aligned already.
So my upbringing, again, just constantly I remember my grandmother telling me, she said, God gives everybody a strength and everybody a weakness, but she gives you that strength to overcome that weakness. And everything you do in life is really meant to glorify God, right? And so this being a practice of mine, not perfect in any stretch of the imagination, but just constantly trying to keep God on your mind when you're doing things, when you're training and everything else. And, those things, waking up, praying, waking up 4 o'clock in the morning before I even know what Fajr was, right? Just the consistency and doing what you're doing. Also, why are you doing it? mostly everything I did, when I look back on my life now, I realized it had less to do with me and it had more to do with other people, because I would think about getting my mother out the ghetto. I would stay up at night watching images of people, on television, 12 o'clock, right? And it would almost always happen, 90-some% of the time. I would stay up and I would turn on television. I would see babies, these infomercials of children starving, and I would be crying, man, like I'm snot coming out your nose type of crying, like, please, God, help me, put me in a position to help people. So what woke me up most of the mornings had less to do with me wanting to be famous. Yeah, we want to be famous. We want to make money. We want to have a nice life. But it was more so, okay, man, I want to help people. I want to take care of my family. This is what I want to do. And so that's why I say that, on top of so many other things, molded me, right, to this life of Islam.
Sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned being from Gulfport, Mississippi.
Yes.
I've always wondered what it's like growing up in Mississippi. My perception of it, it's scary. I mean, even coming from the Midwest, getting pulled over by the police here, all of the interactions, it's scary here. So it's like times 10 in Mississippi. I even drove through one time with my auntie, and it just felt different. So I always wanted to know, what is that really like growing up in Mississippi in the times you grew up?
Well, I mean, of course, that's all we knew. So I didn't know what it was like in other places. But shoot, just if we're being candid, and that's the only way I'm going to be, just being black in anywhere in this country is a challenge. But yeah, Mississippi has a reputation for sure of being more racist, on steroids.
Yeah.
But being that it was all we knew, you learn how to cope, you learn how to adapt to it. You don't really realize it as much until you leave, and then you start reading more, and you start looking at statistics and how things are, whether it's educationally, whether it's the living conditions and what people are making in terms of living wages. I mean, you name it. But then it's just where we are, and growing up and seeing, especially at a young age. You seeing the Ku Klux Klan marching on the beach, right? You seeing the relationship between blacks and whites. And unfortunately, we grow up and it's like, okay, this is just the way it is, but it's not the way it should be. And you just learn how to survive. It reminds me of that film, 12 Years a Slave, when they were talking and the guy was like, I want to survive. He said, I don't want to survive, I want to live, right? So we've been conditioned to survive most of our life. And you start realizing more of the insult the older you get, when you start reading and you start talking to other people, how terrible it was. And then you start seeing how, man, I could see how I began to look at myself as being inferior, how I began to look at myself as being inadequate, because you would see how whites and black would interact. And your parent, your mother or your uncles would almost be so submissive when they had to talk to a white person, putting their heads down. And in private, they're so brave, right? And you carry that over. You begin to do the same things. Unless you're fortunate, I get to that point where you're fortunate, say, hold on, man, I got to break these chains. I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to think this way anymore. And so you grow up feeling that way. Now, the more north you get, because I was in Gulfport, the more north you get, like you headed towards Jackson, there are some places, probably even now, the accent is stronger, and still there's a tendency probably to still want to refer to you, a grown man, as a boy.
Yeah.
And then they say you don't even want to drive through there at night.
Yeah.
Still to this day.
Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting. Don't drive at night.
Certain places.
Certain
places. Now, Gulfport is a little bit more touristy because, not too far from New Orleans. It's on the Gulf of Mexico. But still, it's tough.
You've been playing basketball all your life, though, right?
Yeah, since 9 years old.
So was it always like a tool to was that your way out? Was that what you looked at basketball as?
For sure. Basketball for me, basketball also sort of took the distractions away from not having a father. Because growing up, none of our fathers were in our life. I had 2 brothers beside myself. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is I didn't see a future for myself academically. You know, when you see images of people that are successful, oftentimes it's the actors, the entertainers, the athletes. And I knew at a young age that I had natural athletic abilities. And so for me, I'm like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to use this to get to where I wanted. And I was fascinated with sports. So definitely it was a means to get out of the ghetto for me. And so I took it. It was like life or death for me. And I'm not exaggerating. I woke up, it was like, man, I got to make it. If I don't make it in the game, I don't know what's going to happen to me. And so when I went to train, mostly every day was a near-death experience. On top of, because I have Tourette syndrome too, and it pushes you harder. But like, man, it's between me and you eating. I'm trying to take your head off every day.
Yeah. But I mean, you didn't just play basketball. You were top ranked out of high school. You know, you were exceptional. When did you know though? When did you know that the NBA could be in your future? You could be a potential lottery pick.
Well, you don't necessarily know, but I knew that my skill level was very high based upon what you were doing on the court and based upon the responses you're getting. And so in elementary school, I just knew that I was gifted. I remember playing on the playground on Central Elementary's court. A lady named Miss Oscilletta, we call her Miss Cookie. She gives you the mindset of a Medea type. And she called me over. I didn't even know that they were training. Like, I didn't even see any cars in the parking lot. And she said, go in there and train. They're trying out for the 4th grade. I said, Miss Cookie, you got to ask my mother. She said, don't worry about that. Go train. I'll talk to your mother later. I went in, man, and my first game as an elementary student, I never played organized ball in my life. I had 21 points. And then from there, man, it was just tap, tap, tap. And I stayed on the court, and it just came to me easy. But it was a lot of hard work. You're blessed with the abilities, but I think the work ethic matched, if not was more than the ability that I had. I approached it as though I didn't have that ability. Plus, I knew I was undersized, and that people my size have to be exceptional. Because if you are 6'3" and I'm 5'11" and a half, 6, if you can do what I do, they're going to go with the big guy.
Yeah.
So I got to offer something that's just, you can't refuse.
Yeah. So I mean, so basically you're in Mississippi, but you are of high status. You know, how was that? Did people try to mess with you just because of who you were or who they thought you were gonna become? Like you're an LSU recruit. Were people giving you harder times during your recruitment?
Well, if you say messing with me in harder times, in the context of trying to coerce where you go, in a subtle way, yes.
Yeah.
And none of my family went to college. So I'm pretty much the first being offered these type of deals. So we don't know anything about the recruiting process and how it works. So a lot of my letters were going to the school, and the assistant coach was, Coach Austin controlled the letters. I didn't find out until later. Now, if I wouldn't have found out, there's no telling where my career would have gone. But I missed a prestigious camp, I think at the time, that was held in South Carolina. I didn't even know about the camp. When got back that I was offered to go to the Nike camp in Princeton. 110 of the top players invited to that camp in the nation. I almost missed it because I didn't get the letter. Come to find out, they had a history of hiding letters because they mostly wanted you to go to a Mississippi school. But I started getting, my first letter was from Louisville when I was in the 9th grade. So it was hard for them to totally hide my letters, but they hid them. And so these are the challenges that I face. And when I found out, I had to confront the head coach at the time. And I said, listen, man, I found out what you guys have been doing. And I said, I'm not coming in here to ask your permission. I'm coming in here to tell you I'm going to this camp. And he had the nerve to tell me that, well, if you can get more notoriety in the state of Mississippi than you can at that camp. And I said, are you serious? There's going to be colleges from all over the country. Top camp in the nation, 110. This is absurd. And so I ended up going. When I went, That year, Michael Jordan was there. I'm playing. He pulls me out. Everybody on the in the gym. He's put me at the top of the key. Gave me the ball. He said, "I want you to come at me with everything you have. I'm gonna try to stop you." So I gave him a jab step, went right, scored on him. He gave it to me again. I went through my legs, crossed over, scored on him again. Came out. He asked me for the ball back. Told me to go sit down. Little did I know.
So he quit?
Well, I ain't gonna say no. Michael Jordan ain't gonna quit, but it's a camp. So, but there was a little. I didn't know that there was a scout there. In the history of at that time of the Nike camp, he had never given anyone a 5. 5 was the highest score. Like he had a 0 to 5. He had never given. Michael Jordan's been through there. All these people. He gave me 5 2 years in a row. Now, if I wouldn't have gone to that camp, that probably would have never happened. And as a result of that, I was ranked the #1 guard in the nation for those years. But before going to the camp, so you asked me the question about the things making it difficult. There was a guy named Dr. Dunn in our neighborhood. He's no longer living. And they told me the state of Mississippi had a rule that I had to pay my own way, even though they were paying my way. This is a free camp. They're flying you in, all expenses. But if it wasn't for Dr. Dunn putting money into my mother's account, the state of Mississippi's rule would have messed me up from going to that camp and having that exposure. Wow. And so it's because he put that money into my mother's account that she was able to pay for it. Then also the state of Mississippi said that even though I paid for it, I can't bring back paraphernalia that I paid for. It would make me ineligible. And so I took offense to that. And then because me, it's just not about me. I start thinking about all those other athletes that came through here that probably had opportunities. You guys have been hiding their letters. Probably had opportunities to go to some of these camps, but just never heard of it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I still talk about that, and I'm still bitter about that because I don't know if much has changed since then. So yeah, those are the things that they would do.
That's interesting though. Just I know different times, different reasons, but like here we have an issue with they say they don't recruit a lot of homegrown talent. You know, so they're basically trying to force the homegrown talent to stay there in Mississippi.
Yeah, of course. Okay. And look, man, we know now even more so now it's a business. People get paid for sending athletes to certain places. So how many families never seen some of that money that needed that money? Yeah. You know, that people are capitalizing on. So,
you mentioned having Tourette syndrome. Mm-hmm. Can you just, for those that don't know, what is that? What is Tourette's?
Tourette's is classified as a neurological disorder where your mind and your nervous system on 2 different wavelengths, and you're always trying to negotiate with it, right, to find balance. It's like if I touch this and it doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel balanced, I gotta keep touching it until my mind and my body, my nervous system feel that it's perfect. And so whether it's bouncing the ball, whether it's reading, if I'm reading and it doesn't roll off my lips and my mind right, I have to keep going over it and until the point to where it feels perfect to me. And then if I end up doing that but I don't understand it, I have to do it until all of those pieces are together before I can move on. Which is one of the reasons why when I was in junior high, they thought that I was slow in learning, and they put me in a special education class. And I had a teacher that said, look, if you could show me, I was fortunate to have a teacher. He was a white guy, I can't remember his name. He said, if you can show me that you don't belong, you know, we'll get you out of here. So within about 2-3 months, I buckled down because I said, man, I don't belong here. Because the principal called my mother into the office. And trying to convince her, I'm like, no, Mom, don't let them do this. I don't need it. No offense to those who do. But it was because of that they misdiagnosed me. But I was fortunate to have a teacher that I was able to get to work and he got me out. But it's from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep, you're constantly trying to negotiate, you know, staying still, staying balanced because you got tics and they can become very aggressive. And you know, I used to throw my arm out to the point where it felt like I was hyperextending my arm. I would hit the floor like with my knuckles and it would hurt, but I'd have to keep hitting it until it felt perfect. you know, and so, but those are the things that make it very tough. But if it wasn't for Tourette's, I wouldn't be the basketball player that I became.
That's what I was gonna ask. How did that show up on the basketball court?
Because even though it may take me an hour to get out the house, it may take me an hour to get to the court, because dribbling, if it don't feel right, you know, you got to back. If I'm going in this direction, and if I mess up a few times, I got to back up 10 steps the opposite direction, and I got to do it again. And whatever I do with the right, I got to do with the left, and it's got to feel perfect.
Yeah.
Or I got to keep backing up. So you, all the way. Then when I get to the court, I'm going through drills and I'm imagining invisible people. They're grabbing me. And I'm getting it off. And I'm trying to escape my imagination and get my shot off. And they're always this close to the basketball, so I'm trying to create space, right? And so I'm playing against them every day. But also the shot has to go in a certain way too. And so after that hour and a half workout, now I'm on the basketball court. I'm finished with that hour and a half. Tourette syndrome said, hey, you got to make 10 shots. Every shot got to be, can't touch rim. The move you make before that shot can't have any glitches, or you got to start over. That drill may take me another hour and a half. So I'm leaving the court now. I finally finish. I'm leaving the court. I'm dribbling. Now, when you get off the court, there's grass. You mess up a few times. I have to back up 10 steps. I find myself under the goal. I have to do that drill again now, the 10 shot drill. So that's basically 3 practices in one. It may take me another hour and a half. I knew that, man, if I keep doing this, it's going to kill me. Because I couldn't leave because
Physically?
because if I left and I ain't finished, you see what I'm doing now? Like, it's like your tics, it's like it'll get worse. It'll exacerbate. It'll increase it, you know, because like you knew you didn't finish. And it's like it'll bother you. So I knew I had to start finding another way so I can go home. So after I would finish that 10-shot drill, after the 1.5 hour, 2 hours, then I'd have that other 1.5 hour. I call it Tourette syndrome drill. After I finished the first one, I got the ball and I threw it in the direction of my house. So finally, when I got the ball and I'm dribbling home, if I messed up and I bagged up, at least I wasn't under the goal to have to shoot it. Because if I shot it and it didn't go in right, I have to do that drill again. And so that's every single day. You can't help but get better.
I mean, that sounds like some Mamba mentality, some Kobe.
Oh, no, look, man, no offense. Kobe was a work ethic. You don't have nothing on that. That's a whole, you talking about working to the point almost every single day. I mean, I would have tears in my eyes. I would wake up crying sometimes, not because I ain't love basketball, because I'm like, man, I don't feel like doing this today. Because you knew what you have to put your body through. And it's not a choice of your own. And so you talking about working out to the point, you can't, because if you stop in that 10, you're tired. You can't slow down. Slowing down is also cheating. You got to start over. Not just the glitches. You're going to get the ball. And it ends it. You got to do it again. And so you feel like you couldn't catch your, I don't know if you worked out hard like that to the point where it feel like you can't catch your breath. It ain't coming. And then it comes out and it scares you. And then tears are flowing down your eyes. Man, that's, I'm trying to be animated to show you as much as I can, but it's serious.
No, but I mean, in game though, how does that look in game?
In game, look, it's not totally uncontrollable, or I wouldn't be able to sit here and talk to you or play basketball. However, in the game, you know, you learn over time how to camouflage certain things. You might see me doing that, right? And I might put my hand right here. 90-some% of the time, that's a tick, right? I might, like I'm stretching, that's a tick. You know, so in the game of basketball, You know what I mean? You're playing, but there are certain things I know and trained I will know, but a lot of people won't know. Like, oh, that's a tick, that's a tick. But also what it does, the beautiful thing is, you're playing. A person can't stay with you, and I understood this as a young boy. That's why I would imagine invisible people I'm playing with, and they were always this close. And I'm always trying to create space, just the slightest space to get my shot off. And I would imagine them holding me, like going up and grabbing me and finding a way to finish. Because I said, if I can create this, my imagination is the strongest thing I have. If I can create space with my imagination, a human being can't stay with you like your imagination can. So even when you're missing, right, and you know what it feels like to be tired, you fight through that, and it builds a sort of toughness in you. Like if you miss your first 5, that next 15 going in. Like you don't get shot.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't want to shoot. No, it's like no, I'm not gonna put myself through this abuse and get out here and lay down. You carry, you know, everything there's a carryover.
Sure. You know, with your NBA career, the biggest, most controversial was the not standing for the national anthem due to the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
What did the American flag represent to you that went against Islamic principles?
Islam is not, how do I say it? Islam speaks of, and I don't know the verse verbatim, but Islam speaks about certain symbols, right? And honoring certain symbols. However, the United States flag for me, in my reading, you know, when you have a system and you say well, the system represents fairness and equality and justice, right? But when you start researching and you start doing the history, because I started reading more, not just what Allah was saying in the Quran, right? About He didn't put 2 hearts in the individual, right? He gave you 1 heart, right? So we can't be for justice and injustice simultaneously, right? When I started reading the history of the Prophet ﷺ and certain positions that he took, even there was a case when the Quraysh at the time, they wanted him to acknowledge the system with the gesture of his finger, just show some type of, and he wouldn't even give the gesture of his finger to give some type of acceptability to the system. But then when I started reading books by Noam Chomsky and all of these other people that, you know, after I became a Muslim, they were talking about foreign policy, domestic policy, that's just the history, not just of slavery, but even contemporarily, you know, what's happening in this country and even now. And I'm like, wow, there's a long history of oppression, long history of imperialism, long history of abuse. And then you look at the history of the flag itself. You know, it came out the 3rd stanza and everything else. And I'm like, I can't see myself standing for something like this, right? This is diametrically opposed as far as I'm concerned. Now, some may say, okay, you know, when Allah says He create different nations and tribes and languages, not so that you'll despise one another, so that you will know one another, and the best of you in the sight of Allah is He that is most righteous, right? You say, well, there's nothing wrong with having nations. No, but there are some nations, right, that are toxic. And America's one of them. And so for me, I just saw that that's diametrically opposed to what I believe. And I couldn't see myself standing for a country that represented so much brutality and corruption and harm. And this is why I chose not to stand. And this is what it represents to me even to this day. And this is why I said it represents, but also in fairness to the statement that I made, I said that, am I saying that everything in America is bad? No, there's good that exists everywhere. Right? But wherever the bad is, I said, that as a Muslim, even if it's in Saudi Arabia, we don't stand for it. Right? So, but of course, what they focus on is tyranny, oppression. You know, but yeah, this is why I didn't stand then, and this is why I don't stand now. Among other things.
But I mean, you weren't standing for a while before it became a big
About
issue.
4 months.
Why do you think it became an issue when it did?
Because there was a guy, he was on the documentary, a hitman. He had noticed that I wasn't standing. And Todd Ely, who was an assistant GM, came to me after one practice, and he said, look, someone noticed that you haven't been standing. Want to do an interview with you. What do you say? I said, look, man, we talk about this stuff all the time. And we do. Like on the plane, on the bus rides, there's this notion sometimes from people that, athletes are brain dead. Not all of us. I mean, we talk about so many things. We talk about society and politics and religion. We have all these conversations on when we're traveling.
Like normal people.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, look, even politicians talk about how corrupt sometimes the government is, right? So I'm like, no problem. And then after becoming a Muslim and with the influence of a Malcolm, right, who was outspoken, and I'm trying to break these chains of being that person that's just been quiet mostly all of my life. I'm like, hey, let's talk about it. And that's how it happened. That's how it came to the forefront when he ended up getting that interview. And then I think he had it on the radio, and then someone caught wind. And then the next game against Shaq, the Orlando Magic, that's when the media just flooded the practice after our shoot-around. And that's when they asked me the question, and that's when it blew up and it became global at that moment.
So were you pretty much like, were you surprised or like how the reaction, how it hit the
Yes
media?
and no. Yes and no. Yeah. A part of you as a human being, you like to think that things are changing, right? That people are becoming more vocal and we're able to have these conversations. So in that naive sense, I'm like, and it's good that I had that little naivete, right? Because only God knows if I didn't, how I would have responded. I still think I would have had the interview and did it because of where my mind was going. But a part of it was like, this little idea and hope that, okay, things are changing, we're ready to have some of these conversations. So in that context, I was surprised of the response because we're having these conversations everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In the universities, in the barbershops, on the buses, everywhere. But we're not necessarily having them, it's kind of unacceptable if you're an athlete to talk, but a politician can talk about basketball. But an athlete can't talk about politics.
Yeah, shut up and
or
dribble.
a certain type of politics.
Yeah.
Right? And so I was surprised, sort of, but I wasn't. When you start analyzing history and the way things have gone, whether it's the Paul Robesons, whether it's Muhammad Ali's, right? Whether it's the Tommy Lee, the John Carlos's, who've taken positions and who they were. So that I wasn't surprised. I was like, well, I guess we aren't where I thought we were. Even though there's this concept of so-called free speech, and we're supposed to be such an enlightened society, right?
Yeah.
It proved to me that we're not as enlightened and as free as we thought we were.
But you ended up going back and standing up for the national anthem, right?
No, standing while the national anthem was being played, but not standing up for it. No.
Okay. Okay. Correction. There was a time afterwards where you were back from suspension. Can you tell us what led to that? Like, what made that happen?
You know what? There's a guy who's one of my mentors. His name is Muhammad Abdul-Rauf, out of D.C. I was talking to him amongst some other people, and I was so angry with him because as a Muslim, there's a saying, and I know other people have these sayings as well, that we keep our word, but if you see something better, you do that, right? If you can make it make sense to me, I don't have the type of pride or arrogance to where I'll surrender to the truth. And when we got into a conversation, he was mentioning to me, he said, listen, you're not in the wrong in any way, shape, or form. You can hold this position and you're in the right. But also you can take another position and you can still be in the right? And he was basically explaining to me how the NBA, right? Allah knows best. The NBA has a huge following, right? They have the media visibility, and it's big for us to give dawah, right? To give the message. He said you can use that platform, right, that they have to continue to promote these issues, or you don't have to. Either way, you're good. And he ended up giving me an example of the Prophet, and this is what did it for me. He said the Prophet ﷺ, he said, was with his companions. And at that time, there was a war between them and one of the Jewish tribes at the time. I forget the tribe. But a Jewish funeral procession was passing by. And the prophet stood up. And the companions were like, why are you standing? He says, they take our life. And, you know, they kill us and boom, boom, boom. And he said, the prophet says, I'm not standing for their cause. I'm standing because God gave a life and took a life away. He says, so you can come back and stand and it not be for the cause that America represents, right? In its corruption, its imperialism, and its oppression. And you can stand for those who are being oppressed. And if you can use this platform, and I'm sitting there. Now, this is when I was getting calls from Larry King and all of this. Not that I care about that, but I'm like, at this time, I'm angry. Like, I'm reading so much information. I'm like, man, why is nobody talking about this on a huge scale? I'm tired. Like, I'm tired of hearing this and this and this. And, you know, we got to take a stand, right? This is where I'm thinking. I'm getting ready to go for broke, right? I don't care what people think. But when he said that to me, it made so much sense. You know, because we're always trying to find a balance. Maybe it's the balance, maybe Allah knows best. But that's what caused me to come back. Not because, oh, I had a change of heart. And I knew that once I came back, that there was, oh, he compromised.
Yeah.
And I was ready for it, though. Because every time a journalist came to me, I said, well, I see you. I said, no, absolutely not. I still feel the same way. Nothing has changed. I said, you know, we have a concept. If we see something better, we do that. I said, I still feel the same about this country. I still feel it's oppressive. I still feel it's more terroristic than any other nation. I would give them that. I said, so don't confuse my coming back. I said, I'm coming back because I'm standing for those who are oppressed. And I kept, because I knew that this is what they were going to do. And this is just like with tyranny and oppression, they tried to use compromise. No, I said, no. Absolutely not. I still feel the same way, even more now. And then they would just look at me, right? So, yeah, that's why I came back.
It seemed to be that, a little bit of a division between immigrant Muslims and black Muslims, or I don't know if you want to call them American Muslims, but just Muslims in the States. And you would get criticism from immigrant Muslims for your stance and just how you represented Islam. I just want you to talk about that a little bit. How did that make you feel? How did you receive that?
Well, first, I mean, with all respect, there's divisions all across the board. I mean, even among us as African Americans, we're not a monolith, right? But yes, I would think more so. I don't know the statistics that there's more division between African Muslims and immigrant Muslims, especially when it comes to stuff like this. You know, we grew up in this country, so we're familiar. Not that there's oppression that exists where they are too, where they come from. There's oppression everywhere, but we have our own unique forms of oppression here too. And so when it comes to, you know, how we're navigating through this society and how we look at America, and oftentimes how they look at America, because oftentimes there's this assimilation. You know, a lot of them are trying to assimilate, and that's a whole another argument. But I got a lot of, most of the people that condemned me and that was against what I was doing, it came from the immigrant community. Again, I wasn't surprised. I was disappointed because you would think out of all people, as Muslims, we're going to be the ones that stick up for each other, right? Like we come from the same religious ideology and philosophy. You know, we know the history of the Prophet and the struggles and the Imams and the Khulafa. We know this, right? And you look at other countries and what they've gone through. We know what we're up against, right? You were hoping that, hey, this would bring us even more together. But in some ways, it brought a lot of us further apart. But it was good because you also, in times like this, there's always light. There's always a blessing. You're able to weed out the bad apples. You know, people expose themselves for who they are. You just sit back and listen and observe. And so I had a lady to come to me, and I'm not going to mention her name. I had an event in Denver. And there was a person that came out very vocal against it. And she came to me and she said, and you could see the pain in her face. She's been carrying this for years, and she was a young girl at the time. And she said, Mahmoud, she said, I just want to tell you, she said, when you did what you did, I was for you. I was young then, and I was against my father. I was against what he was about and what he stood for. She said, but Mahmoud, she said, he's no longer with us. She said, but before he passed, he had recognized and realized his mistake, right? That he made a mistake, and that he was regretful for it. And I looked at it and I said, my sister, I said, believe me, I said, I hold no grudge to your father. I said, even after it happened, I was more disappointed, but I never hated, your father, right? And I said, sorry for your loss. And I said, but just know that, you know what I mean? I said, we are all in different spaces in different times, right? And you could see that it just took a weight off of her shoulder, you know what I mean? And so even though I was going through that at the time, I was still, because look, man, I'm not perfect. I'm wrong a lot, probably wrong more than I am right. And so we're all in different spaces and we're learning. And so it doesn't mean that, okay, I don't have a right to be disappointed or angry. But I try to look at life that way. I say, you know what? I don't agree with you. But I'm not going to necessarily hate you, right? I just don't agree with you.
Yeah.
I love the quote by James Baldwin. There's a condition, like, we can agree to disagree as long as it's not rooted in my oppression, right? But in a nutshell, man, a lot of times I would just look and I would try to understand. Because I understand something, it doesn't mean I agree, right? I can understand how a person can get to a certain point, but that don't mean I have to agree with you. So I understood whether you're like, you know what, man, you're in this country, you left the country for whatever reason, it's a foreign land, you're trying to be accepted, right? I get it, and this is how you're going about it, but I disagree. And I disagree with your interpretation, and that's a whole nother ballgame. But yeah, but a lot of it came from that community.
So I seen some criticisms. What do you say to how can you be oppressed making millions of dollars?
Sometimes that is a form of oppression when you use money when you feel that money is a device that you can oppress yourself by having millions, and you want to constantly keep millions, so you become quiet. But also people could use that, like, hey, if you don't do this and you don't do that, right? So on one end, if you want to talk about just individual livelihood, like, okay, I can go buy me a house, I can eat good, no, right? But just because you have money, it doesn't mean that you can't be oppressed. There's a lot of people that's making millions, but they're making millions to keep their mouth shut. Like, look at a lot of the commentators on television, right? There's so many things that they're exposed to, they know the truth to, but they know, hey, man, if I want to keep this check, I can't say certain things, right? Money oppresses. Power, positions oppress. So that's how money can oppress. And so I wasn't going to allow that to happen to me. And I'm grateful because, one, how I grew up first, but then two, the things that I began to absorb. I believe that, I forget her name, Yasmin, she said, what you focus on grows, right? So when I began to focus on what I was consuming, the books that I was reading, what they were telling me, whether it's the Kwanzaa Kunjufus, the Amos N. Wilsons, the Randall Robinsons, I mean, you name it, there's a host of them. And I'm listening to these people, right? And I'm looking at the Patrice Lumumbas, the Nkrumahs, the Fannie Lou Hamas, and people that stood for something, took positions, they risked life, they quote unquote lost material things, but some of the most, when you look at them and you analyze their life, man, they were free. They were the most peaceful people in the world because their lives were predicated on, faith. It was predicated on justice and equality. And so, so I'm looking, and as I'm reading this stuff, these became my heroes, right? And the beauty about reading and analyzing, the more you read and analyze and think, right? When I was looking, basketball and entertainment, right? These things, they absorb you, right? They consume you. You begin to move in that direction. But when I began to read about all these people, naturally what happens, if it start making sense, and it did, you start moving in that direction, right? Yeah. And you can't see yourself doing anything else, right? Because this is what you're consumed with now. So when these other people used to be my heroes changed. My thinking changed. There's a saying that your thinking influences your behavior forms your character, and your character determines your fate. So when I changed my thinking and what I was absorbing, other things began to change. And I said, man, I can't see. So when people saw you're going to lose, I'm thinking of what I'm going to gain. Right? Yeah. Man, you're going to lose this. This is going to happen. We're not seeing things the same. You do know this life is temporary. How do you want to be remembered? George Washington Carver said, no one has the right to come into this world and go out of it without leaving behind distinct and legitimate reasons for having passed through it. What legacy you want to leave? Do you want people to know, oh, you're a great basketball player? Man, you can shoot a jumper. Man, you had nice cars. Or do you want people to say, hey, man, you're a man of conviction. You're a man of faith. You're a man of principles. This happened to you. This happened to you. What do you want your story? So this is what changed for me. And it's still changing me. And I make sure that I'm always consuming those things and being around those people to keep me humble, to keep me hungry, and to never become desensitized, because we live in a society where so much entertainment, so much that we see violence so much that we become desensitized to it. We got a saying as Muslims, somebody go through a calamity or something, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, right? To God is belong, God. And then 30 seconds later, hey man, you want to go shoot some pool? But we don't sometimes sit and think, man, how is that death personally affecting the person that died? That person that died, did they have loved ones they left behind? Are they the sole breadwinner? What's the generational effects of that murder or that death on that person, right? Do we think about it that way? And so for me, this is what began to change. I started seeing whether you're a white child, an Asian child, whether you're from Asia or black, whether you're African, Muslim, Christian, oppression is oppression. And I'm starting to look at each human being. Allah says, you take one life unjustly, it's like you killed all of humanity. So I'm starting to look at any type of oppression, and I internalize invisible people, like I internalize playing against opponents and taking care of my mama, and it's life or death for me to make it. I began to internalize watching that child and looking at him like, that's my son, that's my daughter. Like, seriously, that's my son and my daughter. And what that does, it gets you up, and it makes you fight a little differently than if you look at it like, oh, this is separate from me. And so this is what changed for me.
I heard a story about, I think it was shortly after the documentary, the burning of your dream house in Mississippi. I just want to know a little bit more about that, and how did that affect you?
Well, again, not too much surprises me. I still am a person that's surprised. I don't think we should ever lose that element in us. But I had the timing now, I'm kind of off, but I think it was pre-9/11, was it? I think it was pre-9.
I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was pre-9/11. Listen, you never know who, because of things that you've said and things that you've done, who still holds grudges. But also there are places in Mississippi, as we talked before, that when you go out there, there's still that overt, more so than other places, racism. The Kiln, K-I-L-N, is where we were building. That's where Brett Favre's people is from, in that area. And it was about 30-something minutes away from Gulfport. So it's out in the boonies. But they had 53 acres. They had a pond. And I'm thinking long term, right? I'm thinking, hey, let's get this land. Let me set it up in lots. Let's build a community. Let's raise our own food and everything else. But I guess other people had different things in mind. And I'm in the house one night. And I get a call from a sister Ivy in the community. Because we had also established an Islamic community, and we've been there for about 4 years.
Your dream home?
No. That was 30-something minutes away in Gulfport.
Okay.
Right. And so I got a call maybe 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and said, turn on the news, your house is burning. But before that, we had gone out when it was in the framing process. We can tell that it was a big vehicle, like a truck, because we saw the tire marks. They had rammed their truck into the garage and collapsed it. Then some time after that, there was insignia on the walls of Ku Klux Klan members. Like before you lay the brick, the white, whatever, they had drawings. Then after that, not too long after that, we get the call from Ivy saying, turn on the news, your house is burning. So I was disappointed, but I wasn't surprised. And I was also kind of happy.
Yeah.
Happy in the not happy, but happy in the context. I remember somebody tell me, if you're not pissing, if you're not offending the people that need to be offended, you're doing something wrong. So obviously, I started looking at, maybe I'm still on the right path. If your enemy starts talking good about you, be concerned. So I kind of live by that motto. Yeah, within reason.
I know we could talk forever. I know it's so many layers. I just got to get a couple NBA stuff before you get up out of here. Top 5. Can I get a top 5 from you?
I'll give you a 5 because you asked me minutes later. It may change, and some of it is going to be
all-time top 5.
Oh my goodness,
all
some
time.
of it is going to be. Oh my goodness, there's so many people, man. It hurts. You mean, okay? Period.
Whoever dribbled
any
the ball.
age or particular time or
all time. I want your all time list because I think it's important. You got to see a lot more than a lot of people have seen. I haven't seen some of these people. Only highlights, hardwood classics. So tell me.
Why me, man?
Tell me if I'm off.
I'm definitely going to pick Jordan. Just the impact that he had on the game, his toughness, I'm going to pick 2, man, because when you look at his numbers, he won everywhere he went. His game wasn't the most exciting to watch. I'm going to pick Kareem. This may be a terrible, man, this is, I picked Kareem. I picked Jordan. I'm going to put my Muslim brother on the forward. I'm going to put Hakeem on the forward spot.
Okay.
That's 3?
Yeah, 3.
Man, this is tough, man. You're going to have to help me with names. Man. My mind is going blank. I got Kareem. I got Jordan. I got who?
Hakeem.
2
more all time.
And I take this stuff serious. I'm trying to really think.
And it's still your all time, so you
know. Yeah, but don't put a stamp on it now, because this is a flat, spur of the moment. Kareem, Jordan. Who else I say?
Hakeem.
Man, I'm gonna put. It was something about this. I'm gonna put Bird on there. I'm gonna put Bird on there, man. Bird was tough. One
more.
I don't know.
We could do 4, but then
Yeah,
just because I know it's short for time.
It's my name.
How many points would you average in today's NBA?
That's tough, man. I would like to think that if I was on a team and they just left me alone, you just got carte blanche. You can just go play. With right now, you're not able to touch them as much because it almost like if you come off a screen and you can't really hand check and push me off and stuff like that, it's almost seems like shooting practice. You know, in those scenarios, I would like to say definitely, at least what a lot of those guys averaging now 30 or so. I've never been a guy that, even if you look at all of my career, high school, junior high, the times that I've hit 50 and 40 something, it's when we needed it. I've never been a guy say, look, I'm playing against this team. I want to go see if I can score 70, 80 points. Every time I hit high numbers, it was because we needed it. I just wasn't that player that I'm not just trying to see. I just didn't grow up that way. So, but if you gave me like, okay, go see what you can do, it's different. Yeah, I just play the game and I just try to, okay, moments take charge where I can.
For those that don't know, this is Steph Curry before Steph Curry. You know, the shooting, handling. You know, so this is a guy. This one of those outliers. You know, we like to say they couldn't shoot back then. They couldn't. Who did they have to guard? We like to. Some people like to say that. Not necessarily me, but I'm glad you could make it. You know,
thank you, man.
Like I said, you until today you were a myth. You know, I didn't really believe it. You know, some of that hardware stuff I don't. You know, but
yeah, I appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming, and I definitely enjoyed our conversation. And I wish you the best.
I wish you even more. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You heard it here on Address It, brother Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf.
They touch me. It's consequences that come with that.
I call you next. Hey, Leak, they trying to steal our
I
shit.
feel like a lot of people took away the negative from that.
That people out here lying is trademark, and I own the trademarks, and it's public record.
Like, ain't nobody got to lie about.
Bro, pull up with 20 niggas with ski masks.
Like super hating. Like
Ain't nobody trying to hear you, not no street nigga. But
she ain't never paid for not one of my
I'm not finna die for this shit.
Trying to get out. They died the first thing they say is,
For this shit.
man, he had potential
I ain't never
blow up.
touched none of y'all. I ain't never did. I don't owe y'all niggas shit. I don't owe y'all niggas shit.
She said, I killed a boy, I'm going to prison.
You can out-internet me, but you can't out-business me and out-grind me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.